the culture of innovation. Google was founded in 1998. Most of you were, I'm guessing, about 3 years old at the time. So it's not much older than what each of you is. So it might be useful to actually step back a little bit into the history of the company to get a sense for what has happened in this very short time span of this company. And I stress on the fact that it's only 17 years old, having been founded in 1998, which means if Google was a human being, it would still be in the 11th or 12th standard. Okay, so that's in terms of human years. And back then, if you had tried to visit Google at the world headquarters of Google, it looked like this. This was the world headquarters of the Google. That car shed, you see that? That was where Google was founded. It's a car shed, part of this house in a town called Menlo Park, about 6 miles from where I live. It actually belonged to my first manager at Google. Her name is Susan Wojcicki. She is currently the CEO of one of the Google companies, YouTube. But back then, Susan was this young woman. She had bought the house, she had gotten pregnant, and she was worried about not making mortgage, so she wanted to make a little extra money. So she heard about these 2 Stanford PhD students who were starting a company, and she thought she could rent her car shed to them. So that's what she did. She rented a car shed. And if you had walked into the then world headquarters of Google, this is what you'd have seen. This is Larry Page and Sergey Brin, the founders of Google, sitting in what was their sales office, their engineering development center, their corporate boardroom, everything rolled into one. And a pretty messy looking place. And back then, the company had one product. And that one product looked like this. It was simply a web page, and not a very pretty looking web page, with a little white box that did one thing, which is you could type a word in English, and it would bring back other web pages which had the same word in it. But back then it was considered a miracle. It was astonishing that it could actually do that, and people thought it was pretty amazing. But as you can see, the web page itself looked very ugly compared to what it looks now. And the reason being, Sergey Brin designed it himself, the founder. So if you ask him even today, he says, look, Larry told me to do this. I didn't have too much HTML skills. This is the best I could come up with. But clearly the man must have had some vision, because he wrote under, if you look just below that white box, it says, index contains, what, approximately 25 million pages. And then as an afterthought, he added in brackets, soon to be much bigger. So clearly he had an idea of where he was going to take this and where this could be headed. But that was the humble beginnings of this company, that one web page. And not a whole lot might have changed. The web page looks a little pretty, but what's happened along the way is that little white box you see there continues to be in use today. It's 18 years later, but it is very dramatically different in the sense every single month, 100 billion times humanity comes to this white box and asks something that they want from 200 countries and territories in 120 different languages, including Malayalam, including Tamil, including Gujarati, including Farsi. So to put that in perspective, for every internet user, there are about 2 billion internet users, for every internet user, that is roughly 50 times a month, which includes each one of you in the room on an average, stop at the little white box and ask something that you want to know about that will actually make your life more useful. And Larry Page calls it, he says, we are helping humanity live, learn, and love. His words, live, learn, and love. And that is the extent to which, but sometimes actually people, what they don't realize is, a whole lot has not changed with that little web page. It might look a little pretty, but it's still one box where you go and do a lot of things. When I told my sister, who lives in Trivandrum, Sadi, that I was joining Google, and I asked her to guess like, how many people that work there, and she thought like a few hundred people, and I asked her, why did she think so? And she said, it's just a little web page, right? That's all there is to it. And that is actually by choice, by design. What we've done is, things behind that web page have been changing enormously along the way. But all that complexity is hidden away. We don't think you should be dealing and worrying about the complexity. It's for us to handle. For you, it should simply be that little white box. In fact, along the way, human behavior has changed of how you use that little white box itself. In fact, I was trying to give it a try. My phone is not connected to Wi-Fi. Let me give it a try and see. Bring back the process. So I'm using someone else's phone. When we do live tests, this can sometimes be a little challenging. Where's your browser? Your phone?
The Google person working on an Apple product.
So let me try this quickly to see if I can show you something here on how human beings now. Okay, Google, pictures of Empire State Building.
Pictures of Empire State Building.
So you don't need to see the screen, you see it's actually done, right? I can say, okay, Google, who built it?
According to Empire State Building, 1930, on March 17, construction of the Empire State Building begins under the direction of architect Sri Ram and Harman Associates. The framework rises for an.
Okay, Google, when? So, as you can see, what I was doing at this point is, when I said who built it, by itself it's a nonsensical query. 10 years ago, first of all I'm talking to the phone, I'm not even typing anything, right? Because this is how you do it with human beings. You just ask questions and have a conversation. My first question was pictures of Empire State Building, and it was not even a complete sentence, it brought up pictures. And then I said who built it, and it figured this out and started telling me about who built the Empire State Building, and I can carry on this conversation. So increasingly that white box, human beings expected to behave like another human being for you to be able to have a live conversation itself. So that is the interesting thing. And it's able to do it by parsing it through the challenges. It has to deal with many different kind of accents. I speak to it with an Indian accent and it can still detect it. And it has to do it in many languages. I just did it in English, but we got to make it do it in French and Spanish. And that is the expectation of what all of you are. And if it doesn't even work once, you get very disappointed. Even though it is a free product, right? You don't pay anything for it, but still the expectations are sky high. And that's what I mean by all of this complexity of dealing with language and accents and all of that is hidden away. As far as you are concerned, you pull up any phone, including in this case, I'm pulling up a friend's phone and having a conversation with it. I could even tell it, okay, Google, play me some music, and it'll instantly start playing music on my phone based on my taste and preferences. But that is just one product that originated from it. Along the way, what has happened is, in these 17 years, there have been these dozens and dozens of many products. Most of them you don't even recognize. I don't know if you can read it from that part. I don't either. Why is that? Because these are products that are launched, failed, and have been killed and taken away. And that is a dirty little secret of innovation at Google. We fail far more than we succeed. But failure is not a stigma. We try a lot of different things on an everyday basis. Most of our products probably fail, only get so far, but that's okay. It's out of those hundreds of failures will emerge one big mega success. And a culture of innovation requires what we call the psychological safety of being allowed to fail over and over again and being told it is okay to fail. Because if you're failing, that means you're trying big things, you're taking big risks. And out of that, occasionally you will get mega success. Because out of many of these products, like I said, some you may recognize, some you used it at one point, they're no longer available, or have morphed into something else, have emerged 7 products that are used by 1 billion people every single month. That's like 100 crore people, the entire population of India, equivalent of the entire population of India. And which are those 7 products? So let's make this a little interactive. You should probably be able to guess. Google search is obviously the first one. YouTube 2, Gmail 3, yes. Not groups, no. Google Maps, yes, 4. Android 5. Chrome is 6, yes. The 7th may be a little hard to guess. No, the Blogger actually is Google Play Store for apps for the Android. And there's an 8th one that will join that family very shortly. The numbers are getting up there and we'll announce it, right? So those 7 products with 1 billion people, that's like a big benchmark. That's a huge number of views. At least 1 billion people using it every single month has risen out of this failure. So how do we create this kind of culture of innovation? And all of these that I'm showing you are only internet-based products. Now if you look at what the company is doing, it is also working on a lot of products that are physical products, like a self-driving car, or balloons in the sky that will stream internet all over the world, or Google Glass, a contact lens that go into the eye that will help people with type 2 diabetes. Or there's an entire life sciences division called Verily that is running, or Calico, that is trying to extend human life. So we have gone beyond internet-based services into many, many different areas. And that is the question that Anish and the team asked me to address today. Like, how do you create a culture of innovation that allows a company to operate like this. So in order to do that, at a personal management level, which is the focus for pretty much most of the audience here, in our mind, it boils down to three simple things. The first is who you hire, and once you hire them, once you bring them on board, what sort of environment do you create for them? And when I say environment, it is both the physical environment and the emotional and psychological environment you put those people in. So who you hire, what sort of physical environment you put them in, and then what sort of psychological, emotional space do you create for them to do their work. And that will determine the company's culture and culture of innovation. So let's take each one apart, one by one. So first one, who do you hire? So at Google, there is an operating philosophy that hiring is simply the most important thing that each one of us does at Google. Hiring is the most important thing we do. Why? Because if you look at what the company does, our biggest assets are the extremely talented, innovative Googlers who work there, because it is out of the brains, out of the imagination has emerged products like this. So it's important. And we are a small company. Even now Larry Page says we are a small company. The company may seem very big. Any guesses how many people work at Google? Given the time? Yeah, you know the actual number. It's only 50,000. That is not a very large number compared to other companies out in the world. Let me give you an example of comparison. Microsoft has got close to 100,000. IBM has got 300,000. That's what, 3 lakhs? And Walmart has 5 lakhs. The Indian Army has got 1 million. The Indian Railways has got 2 million employees. So compared to all that, Google is still a very small company. So with a small team, even though the impact, the footprint of the company will look very large. So it's important to think about who we bring on board. And we treat hiring as the most important thing. And there's a general rule at Google that you always hire people who are smarter than you are. The entire interview group should feel that we are talking to someone who's much smarter than we are. And which has actually turned out to be true, because when I look at every month the new people coming onto Google, they're getting progressively much more smarter. But as a result of that, and I've been there 9 years, every meeting I walk into, within minutes I am instantly, acutely, painfully aware that I'm the least smart person in the room. Because over the years, we've been hiring smarter and smarter people. So treating hiring as the most important thing and taking an extreme amount of filtering. I personally went through 18 interviews before I could convince them that I should be hired. And I still think of myself as a recruiting mistake. So don't tell Google that, though. I still want to keep my job. So that is paying extreme amount of attention and taking it very seriously is the first thing that you do in terms of who you bring onto the company. And to do that, we actually cast the net very wide, because Google operates on the philosophy that smart people exist in all populations. And by going and looking for smart talent all over the world in all sorts of backgrounds, bringing in an extremely diverse kind of workforce in actually benefits the company, because it brings in a different kind of ideas. So for example, if you just walk around the Google main campus, and it's not simply in Mountain View, it's in the Dublin office, it's in Hyderabad, you'd see all of these languages being spoken, because people have been hired from all over the world. It could be Russian-speaking people and Hebrew-speaking people and Malayalam and Tamil-speaking engineers or product developers. Because when we go look for smart, creative people from all over the world, it brings in an extreme level of diversity. But it's not just simply in terms of cultural backgrounds. We also look for diversity in terms of academic and other backgrounds. So if we go to Google X, which does a lot of these big forward-thinking projects like the self-driving car, we'll have musicians working there, we'll have biologists working there, we'll have people with a PhD in history and language working there. And the idea being, when you bring in people from so many different disciplines and match them up together, out of that very different way of thinking emerges some extremely creative idea. So as far as possible, we completely hate homogeneity. In my own small team, in fact, in one particular meeting, I'd taken 3 of my teammates for meeting with a client. And it struck, and the clients were from Europe, so they were from different countries and they spoke different languages. And it struck me that between me and my 2 colleagues, Aparajita Jain and Remy Dicko, between 3 of us, we spoke 13 languages. Because that is the kind of diversity that we look for, and so all that big advantage. So who you hire? And once you look at that, I said it's also important what sort of physical space you throw these people into. And let me give you an image of what Google looks like or how Google tries to address it by bringing up a picture here. You see back there, like what the Google office around the world, the physical space looks like. So a couple of things I want to point out here. First of all, it does not look like any corporate work environment you may have seen. And that is by design. The whole philosophy of the company is, if you want to have a very creative work environment, make it fun, playful, colorful. We just look at the colors around here. Most offices I walk to will have gray walls or white and black. That's what the two colors corporations see. They're colorblind to everything else. But at Google, it's like, let's make it explode with color and make it like how a children's workspace is. Because you put kids in a very, very colorful work environment because that encourages their creativity. And we do it with the same with adults. That's the difference. So first of all, it's extremely colorful. It's also playful. It looks like an adult toy and an adult recreational area. So for example, the conventional notion that you go up and down elevator, we are always challenging that and said, who came up with that idea? How do kids go up and down in the playground? They go down slides. Why can't we put that in office? So we have actually slides to go between floors in an office, and I'll be carrying a laptop going from one floor to another between meetings, see the slide, shoot down the chute, and somebody's doing that and go on to the meeting, or pause and play billiards while somebody else is taking a break. Or here's another picture that is one of my favorite. There's one of these guys going up probably stairs to a meeting, while another one of his colleagues, she's on a climbing wall, which is inside the office itself. And she wants to take a break and use the climbing wall in the picture. Also, this notion that you have to be tied down to a desk in a very, very organized looking space. Again, we challenge all that. You see people sitting on a swing or a hammock and working away from the desk. The notion you don't have to be chained to a desk. Work where you feel most comfortable, where you're productive. And the company trusts each other to say, you know what you're doing, you will take care of it. You don't need to be monitored every single minute. And once you give people that kind of freedom, it is amazing that they do. We also let people, the Googlers, design the workspace that they want. So one of the things that came up was, even though all of us sit in open environments, there's no walls between our workspace. And that promotes a lot of conversation and collaboration. And it also breaks down hierarchy. Like when I said, Susan Wojcicki, the CEO of YouTube, was my first manager. When I started, she was running a big portion of her business. And she sat at an open desk. Like there was not even like a cubicle wall around her. And I sat right next to Susan. And the whole idea is if I need to check something, I just walk across and have a conversation with her. I don't feel like that there's a barrier. In many other companies that I work for, all of the senior execs lock themselves up on a separate floor that you need special permission to get to. To me, that sort of culture means that they're imprisoning themselves and cutting themselves off from the rest of the company. Whereas Google takes the opposite model of being completely open and transparent about it. And it starts with that physical space. I don't have a private office. I share it with 3 of my colleagues. And almost everyone at Google operates in that model. Because the idea is that the minute you get into a private office with a door, you are really imprisoning yourself and cutting yourself off from the rest of the organization. Or here are a couple of elements. But you still need privacy sometimes to make a call or you want to do quiet work. So in order to do that, Google has created these kind of spaces. This is like an eggshell. This is almost like an igloo. So you can go into the igloo and it gives you a little privacy when you need it, and otherwise you step away from it. And my final favorite one of this is this one. Like it's probably indoors. You can see the Google sign. Somebody's riding a bicycle. Like he or she's getting to a desk by riding a bike inside the building. So that kind of quirkiness is actually highly encouraged. No one thinks that you are a little oddball. So creating the physical environment is one of the first things that we do to give people the permission to be playful, to be innovative. Once you do that, the next aspect of the company is what I call emotional and psychological safety. And I'll talk about that in detail, but at a high level, let me explain what I mean by that. So when I say emotional and psychological safety, first of all, there's a culture of failure that is allowed. If you try something and fail, it is not a stigma. It is not considered a black mark. It's actually considered a good thing because you took risk, you tried. And my favorite example is this. When Sheryl Sandberg, who's currently the CEO of Facebook, yes, she was at Google. She had made a decision around the AdWords product that cost the company about $40 million. Because of the decisions she took. So she went to Larry Page and to apologize to him, saying, I made this mistake, I'm sorry, and it cost us $40 million. And his response was, he said, I'm disappointed you didn't come and tell me that we lost $100 million because you didn't take a big enough risk and try really hard and fail big. So that completely changes everyone's psychology about the company. Or here's another example. Even though the company has grown to this size, every single Thursday, the founders of the company address the whole company in a town hall meeting. Okay, so and during that meeting, any employee anywhere in the world can ask them any question that they want. So it's an open forum. If you're physically in the room, you get up on a mic and ask. If you are in another room or another office, you actually submit your questions electronically because you can't be there physically, or you might be in a different time zone. So you could be in the New Delhi office, you submit your question, it gets answered, and you go watch the video next morning as what Larry and Sergey. And you can ask any question, and the kind of questions people ask, challenging the founders about big decisions that was taken, is incredible. Again, that creates a psychological safety, saying everybody has an equal voice, and you can question them in what they are doing. The final thing around that psychological safety, is all information around the company is made completely transparent and open. So for example, even Google has a board meeting like all major public companies do, and it's given that it's now the second most valuable company on the planet after Apple, you would think that the board meeting proceedings are extremely confidential and nobody but the board should see it. That is conventional logic, right? Let's keep the information very private and secure only to the board. At Google, the day after the board meeting is finished, Eric Schmidt, the chairman, takes the letter that was sent by the management team to the board and publishes it, and it's completely open to the whole company. We can all go read it now and see what was discussed at the board meeting. And by sending the letter, what their company is also signaling is, we trust every one of you to treat this information with the right amount of respect, that you will not share it with the outside world. It is okay to do it. But just that simple signal itself, and this is the case with all of our information, and including, if you want to see what I work on, you go to the employee directory and click on my name and you can see what I've committed to do this quarter. But I can do it with everyone else. If Anish is working there, I can do it. If MSA Kumar is in Google, I can go look at what he's working on this quarter. So across the whole company, there are no walls or barriers. And that creates a certain freewheeling culture where you are willing to now trust each other and an extreme degree of confidence in the whole team. So now it begs the question, how does it all come together? You want to know, these are all seems like great principles to work on. How do you actually implement this in a step-by-step fashion? And that's what I'm going to spend for the next 45 minutes or so. So a few years ago, we started getting these kind of requests like, what makes Google so innovative? How come this company is constantly churning out all of these products? Are there like some key principles that we can emulate in our organization? So we initially thought about it, and my own response to that question has been just 3 words, and that is, I don't know. And it's not a tongue-in-cheek response saying, well, I have no idea. We often wonder if there is a secret formula or a magic formula that we can actually capture into a book or give a sheet of paper to somebody and says, go do these things and you'll be innovative. We can't be sure. And sometimes we even wonder, if Google were to start today, for the next 17 years, and follow these principles, will we be equally innovative? Will we come up with all of these products? I don't know, I can't be sure. But having said that, we saw some patterns in the way the company has been operating all these years, how it has been building products. And we codified all of those into a set of principles. And those are the 9 principles of innovation that I want to share with you. But in sharing these 9 principles, I'm not simply giving you things that I think work only at Google. It is a belief that these 9 principles can and do actually work in any organization out there. So in sharing it with you, I want you, especially those of you who are students, and if you're a practitioner, I want you to ask the question, will this principle actually work in my organization? How effective will it be? Okay. And if you're students, think of it when you go work in whichever organization you end up with, how many of these 9 you can actually put this into practice and drive and create a culture of innovation. So let me start with the first of those 9. So often when groups of people come to Google, they want to learn about innovation. Sometimes it's from government, sometimes it's from various corporations. And they will ask the question, can I meet the chief innovation officer at Google? Or can I talk to somebody in the innovation department? And that is a bewildering question for us because there is no such person. Among the 50,000 employees, you go type in innovation into the employee directory and look for people with innovation in the title, you won't get one hit. So how is that possible in a company that is known for innovation? There's nobody in charge of innovation. No one has got innovation in the title. What do you think the answer is? Everyone? Who said everyone? Yeah? You said everyone? Yeah, what's your name? Yeah, don't be scared. What's your name? Reggie Ram. So Reggie Ram says it's everyone's job is to be innovation, and that is so completely true. This is what the founders have established. They said that innovation comes from anywhere. It's one of the first core operating principles that everyone in the company is equally responsible for innovation. It can be driven right from the top, or it can be driven by one of you after you join the company and 10 days later you have a great idea. So let me give you an example of one of each to show how that works in practice. So a great idea of innovation driven right from the top, since it can come from anywhere, is this product, Google Glass. And that is Sergey Brin, the founder wearing Google Glass. So he's had an obsessive focus on driving a portion of the company's around wearable computing, things like the Google Watch or Google Glass, etc. It's really, Sergey is driving a lot of it. And it's an example of innovation that is driven from the top. So let me show you how it works in practice through a video. I didn't bring my glass with me on this trip. So let me show you a video of how it works.
Here are the basics of how to use glass. This is your touchpad.
Let's stop it inside
It's
again.
your temple to your ear.
You plug in the sound.
This is your touchpad. It runs from your temple to your ear. Tap the touchpad to wake up glass. You should see the display above your line of sight. Adjust it to see everything. The home screen shows a clock. This is your timeline. It's a row of cards. Things to the left are happening now or coming up, like the weather, an upcoming flight, or an event in your calendar. You can tap on any card to see more. Swipe down anywhere to go back to the timeline. Cards to the right of the home screen are from the past. For example, messages, videos, or photos. Tap on a photo to share and choose one of your friends. Swipe down to go back to standby. And have fun exploring.
So what this team has created in terms of innovation is a remarkable physical product that actually increases human capacity in so many ways. First of all, I call it, it behaves like a human organ in that you can touch it, it responds, you can see things, it can listen to you, it can talk to you. When it talks, nobody else can hear it because it uses ocular bone conductivity to just talk and send signals right behind your ears. And it increases your brain capacity because once you wear it, you walk around. You can, through the internet, you're now tapped into all of the collective recorded wisdom of humanity that is publicly available. Right? So you can wear this glass, walk down the street, and ask any point, like what is the capital of Burkina Faso, and right there to show you and you hear it, Ouagadougou. So to that extent, it increases your brain capacity all of a sudden. So it's a remarkable piece of innovation that they're playing around with even now. How long do you think it will take to build a prototype of a product like this? There are no right or wrong answers, so take a guess. It's a physical industrial product. So if you were working in any organization or building, how long will it take to build a prototype? A year? Sorry? 15 years? Okay, 15 is one guess. Any other guesses? 5 years, yeah. 5, 3, these are standard response if you tell any industrial organization to build it. But at Google, to drive innovation, we follow a process called rapid prototyping. So using rapid prototyping, we try to accelerate it and not take that much time. And using rapid prototyping, the first prototype of Google Glass was built in 90 minutes. 90 minutes. So you can say, like, how is it possible that you build something in 90 minutes? This was the first version of Google Glass that was built in 90 minutes. So I know that evokes a laugh. But essentially what the engineers did is they brought ski goggles from the home, and took a regular laptop computer, mounted it on a backpack that they got from the Google store, took all these cables that you get from the Google Tech Stop, and then for this version of Google Glass to work, functionally it needs a camera, it needs a visor, it needs an earphone for you to hear the sound, etc. Those are off-the-shelf components that they buy from an electronics store. Plugged it all together, walked into Larry Sergey's office and said, here is version 1 of Google Glass. In 19 minutes they put this together. Functionally they showed what wearable computing could look like in the future. But it was not very usable in the sense it weighed 3,500 grams, so you have to walk around with all this weight, and aesthetically it's not pleasing. You cannot walk around with this in the city and look cool, right? But functionally in 90 minutes they say this is what it could look like. Then they iterate from that point onwards. So then the next version they said, we don't need a whole computer actually for the functionality we're looking for. Most of what we're looking for is available on the smartphone. So why don't we take the smartphone to the ski goggles and what it looks like. So from this they go to this model. See, with just tape on the phone. Then they keep iterating and eventually very, very rapid cycles. They try different kinds of models. And in 6 months, they had gone from 3,500 grams to 450 grams. And then they took another 6 months to go to the version that was last seen in public that weighed about 75 grams, which is less than the weight of a pair of sunglasses some of you are carrying around. So that is the rapid iteration process that allows us to drive that kind of innovation. And like I said, this is an example of innovation driven right from the top, one of the founders said. But I also told you there's this culture of innovation that allows anybody to feel that they can be innovative. You could be, a month after you join the company, if you had a great idea, because decisions are made not based on your hierarchy, but it's based on the power of your idea. If you can present a good idea and argue persuasively, the company will listen to you and actually allow you to go forward with it. So here's an example of that kind of innovation driven by this gentleman, a friend of mine. His name is Dr. Ronnie Zeiger. And the reason he's called doctor is not because of a PhD. He's a medical doctor. He was working on Google Health at the time. And another product that they tried, it hasn't launched, it didn't give the results that they looked for. It was killed and the company's moved on. Like I said, culture of failure is okay. There's psychological safety. So Dr. Ronnie was working, he was looking at the kind of terms people were searching for that are health related, and something he saw bothered him. And that was the fact, the number of times people were typing in suicide into the Google search box. And as a medical doctor, he's aware that suicide is a rampant problem in human society everywhere. And he also knows the statistics very well. In the US, I know the numbers. In a typical day, 88 people in their lives. 22 veterans, people who come back from military campaigns around the world, end their lives. So what troubled him even more than the fact that people are searching for suicide is what was coming up on Google when you type in suicide. So the Google search algorithm has been perfected over time, and the engineers have optimized it to give you the best results. And so when you type in suicide, the best result that was coming back was what? How to commit suicide. And as a medical doctor, he was troubled by that. He said, when somebody types in suicide, that is a human being's desperate plea, last plea for help. And we have a moral obligation to help that person. But in order to do that, we had to artificially insert something else and override what the search engine with computer sense logic was doing. And that was heresy on the Google campus, because we don't mess around with the algorithm. The algorithm is supreme. We let it do its thing. We don't artificially put in things to do it, because that would be violating the trust our users had. But he argued persuasively, showed the data around the world, how many times people are committing suicide, how many times people are searching on Google, and what kind of impact we may have. So thanks to the innovation that he drove, for the first time in the history of the company, we agreed to make a change. And that was when you type in suicide, the first thing that you get at the top is an artificially inserted 1-800 helpline number for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. In fact, it looks like this, where you see that red symbol right at the top. That is the 1-800 number that will show. In fact, I was going to see if it works, if I have the internet. Let's do a live demo what happens. Because that change that he introduced has been extended around the world. So let's go to Google and type here. So it knows I'm in Cochin. I type suicide. And you see that the first result it brings up is the ASRA number. What does ASRA stand for? No, it's the helpline. I think it's a suicide assistance organization in India. So you call this number and they are on standby to help you. So around the world, we have introduced this change, starting with that one change that Dr. Ronnie argued for. And not only that, here's what happened shortly after that. Get out of this. So shortly after we introduced the change, within minutes, the call volume to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline went up by 9%. Hundreds of more calls were coming into that, and many more people are being persuaded from not ending their lives. And it's a good thing for somebody like Dr. Ronnie to actually go home and to be able to tell his wife, saying, "Honey, I introduced a piece of innovation today that's actually saving human lives." And the moral of the story is that the culture of innovation can come from anywhere. It can be one person deep in the organization driving something that actually has a huge impact and saves human life. Okay? So how many of you think in your organization, so the one that you're going to join in the future, this isn't easily implementable? The philosophy, tell the whole company, everyone can be innovative, and you'll be heard, you'll have an audience. Raise your hand if you feel confident about it, now or in the future. Wow, nobody? Not one company in Kerala? Or India? Okay, 3 people finally thought. That's it. So that's worrying actually, that if you think the entire company cannot be innovative. I hope you're not raising hands because you're shy as opposed to it's not possible. Because if more hands don't go up, then that is a disturbing trend in my opinion, because we'll never be able to be competitive unless the whole company is constantly thinking about how to be innovative and driving great ideas forward. Something for you to think about and actually change the culture of the company. MSA, what do you think? Man? You advise a lot of companies in Kerala.
Well, it can be done by anybody anywhere.
You can be. Okay, so it is possible.
A typical example will be when Nirma was fighting in Susanliva.
Yeah.
They had an ad in terms of the volume.
Yeah.
That was brought out by a salesman.
Exactly.
Creativity or innovation can come from.
Yeah, any part of the organization, right? Including actually last week, MSA took me to Kozhikode, and in one of the events he had the collector Prashant Nair come and speak, and he is a pretty disruptive, innovative collector. In fact, he has implemented something where the innovation is coming not from the government. He's actually thrown it over to social media. He's asking the citizens of Calicut to solve problems. He took a list of, in fact, the example he quoted was he went to the mental hospital in Gujarat, saw a list of problems, published it, and said, we need to solve these problems, and I'm not going to take money, I'm going to take actual practical solutions. And the citizens of Calicut are now solving the problem, whether it's food or sanitation or housing. That's an example of disruptive innovation, where you bring in the community to solve the problem. Again, the philosophy, innovation can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to rest in one government bureaucrat responsible for that particular health facility. The second principle of innovation in Google is this notion, let me get back to change, focus on the user or on the customer and all else will follow. At Google we call it the user. Anyone who uses Google Maps or Google Search or YouTube, we call them the end user, and the company's philosophy is just focus on the needs of that person, don't worry about revenues, profits, etc. All those will take care of itself. So this is a piece of philosophy that every organization claims that it does, that we focus on our customer, make sure we do everything for the customer, which is true, well and good, and for the most part, most organizations really mean well and they want to do it. But there will come a point in time in any company's history when you have to do something for the customer that could be in direct conflict with what it could do to your revenues or profits. And it will pull in different directions. At that point, that is the moment of truth. What decision will you make? And that really determines if the company is committed to focusing obsessively on the needs of the user. So let me give you an example in practical terms how something like this plays out at Google. And I'll actually give you a live demo to illustrate. So if you go to google.com today and search for, so I'm typing in something, so let me go back to and type in like weather. So As soon as I typed in WEA, and I searched a few days ago, I didn't even complete the query. It's giving me the weather in Trishul, which is where I was yesterday. And this is a feature you might have seen. As you're typing in, the results are given to you by the time you type in one or two alphabets. This is a feature called instant search, where as you're searching it, you're given the results. This shaves a few microseconds of the search experience. A few microseconds. As you're typing, you get the results, and if it's something else you're looking for, as you add the next alphabet, it keeps refreshing itself. A few microseconds. It is so small that it's actually, most human beings will not notice it. It's not discernible. Why did the Google search engineers obsess over a few microseconds? Particularly when you may not even notice it, may not matter to you. Why do we care about a few microseconds? Because their philosophy is focused obsessively on the user. What would you guess? Sorry? It saves time, but like I said, it's a few microseconds. Does it really matter to you? If things come up a few microseconds, it's so small that you don't notice it.
It's predicting what the user wants. So it's kind of like guiding him to where he wants to go.
To what you want, right? Yeah.
He may not always know what he wants.
Yeah. But it uses predictive analysis to guess what you want. But eventually we have to get you to what you want. Okay, the two reasons actually what drove it was, the first was the few microseconds for each query is small. But I told you in the beginning, every month, 100 billion searches. You added the few microseconds across all of the searches, we end up saving thousands of years for humanity as a whole. So the numbers add very quickly. The second reason is 50% of the searches today are coming from what device? From the mobile phone. On the mobile phone, people are actually looking at something as they're walking down the street or engaging in some other activity, and you don't have all 5, 10 fingers. You're typing with 2 thumbs. So we have to get you back the answer very quickly. If you had to type weather threshold using 1 thumb, that can be painful, take a long time. So here, we're trying to get you the results. So those are the kind of things, okay? So all of this is well and good, except it raised the issue, what happens if the results are coming up, as you can see, here are the results, and there's nothing that typically come on the right-hand side, which are the ads. That's the goose that lays the golden eggs for Google. What happened to those ads? Because that's how we make our money. So when this team was launching this piece, there are no ads there because they're coming up so fast. Who's got the time to look at the ads and click on them and make a decision? So the team that was working on this just went ahead with, they were getting ready to launch it. And at that time I was working on the Google Ads product, and as someone, our team working on the ads product had to take an interest in what is going to happen with the revenues because that is our product. So we asked the search team, have you done some analysis around what is going to happen to the revenues? And they said, we don't know, we don't care. Because that is not what matters to the user. For the user, it is the search experience. So we scrambled quickly, ran some numbers, ran some analysis around what is going to happen in fact. And the answer came back that it would actually result in a decrease in revenues. Not a whole lot, a few $100 million. So we presented this to Larry and Sergey, and you know what the response was? They said, go ahead and implement it. They said, don't worry about the drop in revenues. This will create such a great user experience. Go ahead with this change, and we will take that revenue in. That is what I mean by this intense commitment to focusing on the user and being confident that the revenues will take care of itself. It actually took care of itself. In the long run, what has happened is, because the search experience on Google has been so extraordinary, the number of times Google users are searching from different countries, different languages, different devices have gone up over time, that over a few months, actually the revenue curve took care of itself. So that bet that they made, that focus on the user and things will take care of itself, has worked. This is one of hundreds of examples I can show where the company has the courage to say, let's do the right thing for the customer and not worry about short-term revenues and profits. And in the long run, they've all turned out to be extremely good bets. Let me pause here again. Show of hands, extreme focus on the customer, even at the risk of short-term revenues. Will that fly in your organization? One hand, faintly. Okay, more people feeling comfortable. Good. Okay. And try it and take a few risks around it and see what happens. The next principle, I'm the wrong screen, not the light demo. Innovation principle that the company goes by to create this culture of innovation is this notion of think 10x. This is a mantra that Larry Page has been hammering into us ever since he took over as CEO second time. And here's the philosophy behind it. He says, if as an organization you come into work every single day and improve your product, improve your process by 10%, it is good. But it's an incremental improvement. You just make things a little bit better. Still positive, but only slightly better. And you end up creating a company of incrementalists. Whereas if you try to make something 10 times better, 10 times faster, it forces you to step outside the box and come up with a solution that human beings have not thought of before. So an example of that is, what is your name?
Jijo.
Sorry?
Jijo.
Jijo, right? So let's say Jijo wants to, if Jijo wants to go from here to let's say Bangalore, and he comes to me and says, I want to go get that 10% faster, I will end up designing a better car for him that maybe is a little more fuel efficient, goes slightly faster, because that'll get him that 10% faster. But if he comes and says, I want to get there in make it 10x better, how much time does it take to go from here to Bangalore? 12 hours? Yeah, so 12 hours, he says, he challenges me saying, I want to get there in 1 hour. Now I know that surface transportation may not work by road. I'll have to come up with other solutions. Maybe a fast-moving boat that goes down the coast with no obstruction that hydroplanes on the water, or maybe I come up with aerial transportation. So it just forces me to think and come up with a completely different solution. That's what 10x thinking does. So to create a culture of 10x innovation in the company, 3 things have to come together for us. The 3 things means, first we look at some big problem that exists in humanity that we need to solve, some big problem. The second, we come up with some radical solution. When I say radical solution, it is solving the problem in a way that human beings have so far not even thought about. But that by itself, you can come up with crazy ideas. So in Jijo's case, I can say, okay, we'll strap a rocket onto your back and launch you into space. But you need to practically develop a technology. So that is the third ingredient that is needed, which is some sort of a breakthrough technology. If those 3 things come together, big problem, radical solution, breakthrough technology, then we have the perfect storm for 10x innovation. One final test that Larry makes us apply is it has to pass what he calls a toothbrush test. And here's how the toothbrush test works. So if you look at a toothbrush, think of the dentist who created the toothbrush. He's created an incredible product. Here, see the first person came up, that is so useful. It does not require a user manual, simple to use, but we cannot live without. All of us use it twice a day, and not just going to say all of us, billions of people around the world use it every single day. So with the products he builds, he makes us ask, is this a product that people will find so easy to use, so intuitive, and find it extremely useful that they will want to use it at least twice a day, and it has to be hundreds of millions of people. If not, he sends us back to the drawing board saying you're not thinking big enough. So I'll give you an example of how all of this plays out. So we start with the big problems. One of the big problems that exists today is that most people in the world do not have access to the internet. If you think about it, we all have access to the internet, we take it for granted. But only 2 to 2.5 billion people have full access to the internet today. But 5 billion people in the world have no access to the internet. In fact, a lot of people in India, a lot of people in China, many other parts of the world. So that is a big problem. We also know that regular solutions like running cable to the house or Wi-Fi, etc. is not going to solve the problem. So we have to come up with some solution that human beings have not imagined in order to get the other 5 billion onto the internet. In fact, I'll give you the economics of the problem is challenging, and that is for 80% of people in the southern hemisphere, it costs 1 month's salary to have an internet connection. So how many of you will actually get an internet connection at home if you have to pay your whole month's salary? You will say, I don't want internet because you've got to pay for rent or food. So that is the problem we're trying to solve for. So to solve that, using 10x thinking, here's what the team is working on. So this is the solution that they come up with. Some of you made pictures with, some of you may recognize it. What is this project called? Loon. Okay, it is called Project Loon for 2 reasons. I'll tell you the first one, because it uses balloon technology. So what they're trying to do, so the solution they came up with, they said regular solution like running cable into the house is not going to help solve the problem. So the out-of-the-box thinking, I told you the radical solution was, What if we send a signal up into space? And let's imagine there's a reflector in the sky, like this projector there. So I send it up, and something in the sky reflects it over a wide area, and then we can have internet over a large area, and you don't have to worry about mountains and islands and things like that. So that is the radical solution. Except there's no practical way, there's nothing in the sky to reflect it. That's why I said, no, we can actually make it work. Why don't we put those reflectors on a balloon, helium-filled balloon, floated up on the sky? But then the problem becomes two things. First is it needs some sort of power or energy for it to operate. So right on top of this payload, they have a solar panel. So during the day, it charges itself by getting energy from the sun. And the second problem was that you cannot tether it to one place. You can't run cables from the Earth. So where does it float? Because it can't interfere with airspace. So I said, let's fly it at least twice the height of commercial airlines. Commercial airlines fly at 30,000 feet. These balloons are sent up and stay at 60,000 feet. But you can't run a rope all the way at 60,000 feet. So the wind that carries the balloons away, it doesn't stay in one place, and that's a problem. So you have to solve that problem. So you constantly keep trying, saying, we hit a problem, we solve it. We hit a problem, we solve it. So the winds were carrying these balloons away. But then the engineers argued that saying that it's a solvable problem, because using the massive amount of computational power available in the data centers, and using the data that's available for weather bureaus, at any point in time, we can accurately calculate which way the wind is blowing. So we let the balloons float for about 100 to 200 kilometers in one direction, because we know we can exactly predict where it'll be an hour or two later. And then, using the energy through the solar part, we raise or lower the balloon to catch a wind going in the other direction and let it float for 100, 200 kilometers in one. And then we raise or lower it, and that's where we keep the balloon within one area. Okay, so now we have hundreds of these balloons on an experiment over a remote area of New Zealand, and you can watch videos on YouTube. And most recently, we are actually going to start doing these tests around Indonesia. So if we look at Indonesia as a country, there are 4,500 islands on which Indonesians live. And this is the only practical way by which internet connection can be brought up. So, and I said there are two reasons why it's called Project Loon. One is it uses balloon technology. The second is, even by Google's crazy standards, this is considered such a lunatic project that within Google campus, it's affectionately known as Project Loon. There's one constraint that we have, that we are not able to scale this project fast enough. Okay, one limitation, it's a physical limitation. What would you guess that is? If you're a material science person, you would. I'm sorry?
Lifetime of the balloon.
Lifetime, no, that's okay. We recycle the balloons, they collapse, we track every one. We have a program by which if you find it, you bring it back to us, you get rewarded, etc. It's actually one material that is not available, that is in short supply. It's actually helium. The world does not manufacture enough helium at a speed at which we want to fill these balloons. So that's limiting the expansion of this project. But that's a solvable problem. We'll figure out some 10x solution to it. And that's how the thinking of the company goes. So think of solving problems not 10%, but make it 10 times better, 10 times faster. And they'll force you to come up with incredible kind of innovation. And that becomes the culture of the company. So now everyone talks about in the company, how do we change something 10x, not simply 10%. And that's what you're rewarded for. The next principle of innovation. Let me pause here and ask, so all of this is making sense, especially students? Is it resonating? Yeah? Want me to keep going with the other? In a minute, I'll do a test just to make sure that the test meaning who wants to continue and wants to leave in an anonymous way we'll do that. So we'll keep going for a couple more principles. So the next innovation principle I want to talk about is something called bet on technical insights. Again, in terms of culture. So we are often asked the question, if people are all innovating, people are doing different things, how do you know which one to bet on? Which ones will succeed? Because there are dozens of people and they're doing all sorts of different things around the company. So this is where each organization should trust its instincts and bet on what it uniquely understands. Okay. So if we were to again use MSA Kumar as an example, his company, AVT, understands food additive products in a way. Yeah, is that the core product? Yeah. In a way that the rest of us do not, because that is the core competency. And therefore, they can drive innovation in that space because they see the world in a very unique kind of way that the rest of us cannot. So if you trust your instincts based on what you know, you can actually drive a lot of innovation. And it is betting on those kind of technical insights that led to this piece of innovation, which is the Google self-driving car. Because often we are asked, how come it is Google that came up with the self-driving car, not some company in Detroit, not some auto company in Germany? And that's because there is some unique insights about the world and how we do it, and I'll explain that in a minute. But first of all, let me give you a demo of the self-driving car. So, before that, actually, let me tell you how 10x thinking led to this innovation. So, what started it off was the big problem. It's the first criteria, big problem. Big problem that the engineers were looking at is a piece of data that is every year 1.8 million people die due to auto accidents. Okay, that's what, about half the population of Kochi? Okay, every year gets wiped out in auto accidents. Next year you start again, and the other half is killed in auto accidents. That is a terrible, tragic loss to humanity, right? And 94% of those accidents where people die are caused by what? By what? Louder, I can't hear it. Human error, exactly. People fall asleep at the wheel, they drink and drive, they try to text and drive, they get distracted. So that was a big problem. Radical solution, let's take human out of the picture. Let's make cars drive themselves. Except that's a preposterous idea. How can you have cars that drive themselves? So the breakthrough technology was, this is where the engineers argued. They said, look, we have all of the information that we need to make these cars go safely. First, what does a car need to know to go safely? If it's going from here to Trivandrum, it needs to know point-to-point direction, which street to take. They said, we already have that information because you are using it today in Google Street Maps, turn-by-turn direction. So we have it. The second thing that a car needs to know to be safe on the street is what? What's going on in its immediate vicinity. Even if you know the direction, there are bicyclists, there are other trucks, there are people cutting across the street. So you need to be able to make decisions in real time based on that. And they said we already have that information because the Google Street View cars, which were going down to capture Street View imagery with 4 cameras on top, were already seeing all this information, except we were not operating it on real time. They said we can take that information as each car goes down and make it, using artificial intelligence technique, make it take the right decision and be safe on the road. So here's how it works. First, functionally, I'll show you through a video how this car works. So in the first video, you'll see a gentleman called Steve Bayham. He's actually blind. He's the president of the Santa Clara Blind Association, and he is going on a test drive using the self-driving car.
Yeah. What do you want to do, AC? I'm all talking to myself. All right, well, so you're talking right here. Yeah, we're 95% of my vision is gone. I'm well past legally blind. You lose your time in life, everything takes you much longer. There are some places that you cannot go, there are some things that you really cannot do. Where this would change my life is to give me the independence and the flexibility to go the places I both want to go and need to go when I need to do those things.
This is remarkable, right? And what it will do in the future, of course, you get point to point and you're able to get these cars that will actually drive themselves. You may not even need private cars because whenever that is the vision of the future. You just call for the car drives itself, comes and picks you up, and then takes you, drops up, and then goes and parks itself. You know, it sounds crazy, but this is the future that we are imagining using 10x thinking. Because 90% of cars today just sit and do nothing. They sit in parking lots most of the time. And with this, we can actually cut down the number of cars in the world. So what is the unique technical insight that made Google come up with? And I've showed through a video demo what exactly that is. So one big talent that we have is we look at the physical world and we digitize it and store it in a database. And the minute you do that, cars can do a lot of things with that information. So for example, if I'm going from here to Alwai and my self-driving car is going down, it looks around and it records everything that it sees and puts into a database, including the fact that the road at that point angles at 30 degrees and that there's a curbside that is 6 inches tall, etc. And once that is in the database, the next car that is coming down the street already has that information even before it gets to the intersection, so it's a lot more smarter. And it captures more information, puts in the database. Each car coming down gets smarter and smarter, because right now when a car goes down, you as a driver see things around, you're not telling the next drivers behind you. But using this system, every car is communicating effectively through the database. The second, when we drive, we don't have eyes at the back. There's blind spots, that's why we have to turn and look in both directions. But this car sees 360 degrees, there's no blind spot. Third, when we drive, if there's a bus in front, we look at that bus and make decisions based on that. If that bus stops, we stop. But we can't see what is happening in front of the bus. Our vision is obstructed. But this car actually takes that thing you see on the top, that is a lidar, actually bounces a beam under the vehicle in front. It reflects off the vehicle, 2 vehicles, 3 vehicles, and comes back. So it's making decisions based on what things are happening to 2 and 3 vehicles in front. And the final thing I'll show you through a slide demo, one of my colleagues explaining this, and that'll actually illustrate to you why these cars are so safe that they've not had a single accident in their entire testing period. They've done millions of miles. So I'll pull up another video, get through. So this is Priscilla. Her job is, she's one of a team of people that actually test these cars. So self-driving car testers is a job role, job definition at Google. So when Priscilla explains it, she's taking this car for a test drive. She shows a bicyclist coming down the street. He puts his hand and she shows how the car makes a decision. So in a window here, you will see what the human eye sees through the windshield. The rest of the screen will show what the computer is seeing and how it's making decisions based on what the bicyclist is doing. So that'll give you an illustration of digitizing the world, putting it in a database, and then acting on it.
I'm Priscilla, one of the test drivers on the Google self-driving car project. A big part of our job is to go out into the world and uncover all the potential scenarios that a car might encounter. Our cars treat cyclists as a special category of moving object. Watch in this example when
So you see this, there's a cyclist here and he's making a decision, and the car's computer is also seeing, it's color-coded, it's saying, you know, be careful about, there's a person moving around, he's putting his hand out, and it's making a decision based on that.
This holds up his arm. Our software detects the hand signal and predicts his movement into our lane. The car knows to continue yielding to the cyclist passing by, even when he changes his mind, multiple times.
Okay, so that gives an idea of what, depending on your unique technical insight, the kind of innovation that it drives. The next principle I want to talk about, I'll skip one here and go to this one, is a concept called 20% time. Here the notion is, we saw, or the founders saw, that a lot of innovation comes out of universities. In a university environment, if you are a professor, if you're a PhD student, you have a lot of freedom to innovate. You can work on pure sciences, you're not constrained, and you can let your minds wander like dogs without a leash. And it's that kind of intellectual freedom that is driving scientific breakthroughs in a university research environment. So then they ask the question, but in a corporation it gets stifled. You have to work on set projects, a lot of boundaries get, your handcuffed to certain core notions, your manager might be a little dictatorial. So they wanted to break away from that and create a culture where anybody can have the freedom to work on anything that you want. Without, and you still have like a meaningful project that is important to the company as well. So they created this notion of 20% time. The idea being that you can take 20% of your time to work on whatever you want. It might not even have nothing to do with your core project or even what the company is working on. 20% is a big commitment. That is 1 day a week. They said 1 day a week, go spend on whatever you want. We trust you that you will do the right things with it. And out of that has come a lot of amazing, interesting ideas. So for example, Google News was a 20% project. Dr. Krishna Bharat, he wanted to create a news feed that would be useful to him. He came up with it and it's become this very successful product. Google Alerts came out of 20%. Google Cardboard, the new virtual reality product, 2 engineers in the Paris office spend the 20% of the time. I practice and teach yoga, so I've created a big yoga program at Google called Yoglers for the Googlers, and that is my 20% project. So it doesn't even have to be technology, it can be in other areas of the company. But I feel through that we create more creative Googlers are coming because they're practicing yoga and getting more centered in the mind and body. But that's because I have the freedom to take my 20% time and work on things like that. So I'll show you an example of how it works in practice. Using 20% of time, one of the engineers on the Google Maps team, Dan Ratner, solved what he called the Stonehenge problem. Stonehenge is a monument in the UK. Dan was visiting the monument with my then boss, who was his girlfriend, Celia Seno, and he tried to look on Google Maps on Street View to see what the monument looked like before he got there. And the Google Street View imagery ended at the gates of the monument. There's nothing inside of the monument that you could see. So he's frustrated. He asked, like, why? What is the problem? And he was told that's because the Google Street View car is not allowed to drive on the property. The Stonehenge administration does not allow cars to go onto the property. So he came back, used his 20% time, and solved the problem. He's an avid bicyclist, and he took the Street View camera, reduced it down, scaled it down so it could sit on a bicycle, and this is the product that he created as a result. So he took an ice cream cart and put the same cameras on top, because now you can ride it onto the property. You can take it down narrow streets down, say, Matangeri or Guruvayur, and even if Street View cars cannot go down the street. So this is how it works in practice. So once he had solved for this, then the next question came up, what happens when you go down a narrow street and at a temple or a railway station or a museum? What if you want to see inside of that space? The bicycle cannot go into the building. So then they use 20% time to reduce it and put it on a backpack. Now we are humans, actually, it's called the Street View Trekker, where you can actually carry the 4 cameras. See, it fits on your backpack, and then you can walk in indoor spaces, so it could be a temple or a museum or something. Again, this is what 20% innovation does. Now people are free to think, and they come up with ideas. They solve all of this, then somebody asks the question, okay, what happens? All of this happens on Earth. What about ocean? And if you want to see. So they use the 20% time to then build these cameras that can actually divers carry on the backs now. And Google Ocean View. And if you now go to Street Views and look for this, there are images that actually take you to the bottom of the ocean, and you can start. These are like set images that come from around the world where you can actually navigate your way. And a couple of them will take you underwater for different places. So these are all surface-based. So the underwater ones would look like, so in this case, the Great Barrier Reef. And that takes you to like underwater street view in places like this. So what they've done is they put this, mounted these cameras on divers in these cases, and then you can actually look at underwater sea view, etc. Okay? So all of this is because you have the freedom to do 20% innovation. How well will this principle work in your organization? Give people the freedom to do whatever they want in terms of innovation. Give them actual specific time, at least 1 day a week or some hours a week. Yes, no, 2 hands, 2 people, 3? Okay. All right, the last 3 innovation principle I want to talk about, it's a concept called default to open. And what this principle is based on is the fact that in Silicon Valley, in the tech industry, there are 2 models that are prevalent. One is the Apple model, where Apple actually controls the design of its product very tightly and the manufacturing, etc. And which has worked well for them. All Apple products are fantastic, they're brilliant. But how many companies make the Apple iPhone? How many?
Just now.
1 company. You can buy the Apple iPhone only from Apple. And that's because they control the design so well, they want to make sure it works perfectly, okay? And it served them very well, nothing wrong with it model. Google bet the other side. When it comes to the Android phone, how many companies make the Android phone? Dozens, it's more than 150. We said we took the Android platform, gave it out to the world and said, go build phones that you want, adopt it, customize it. And why did we do that? Because we follow this principle of defaulting to open. And the core operating principle, philosophy behind defaulting to open is this. We wanted very smart people to work on this technology, and we realized that the smartest people who can actually innovate on the Google Android platform don't actually work at Google. They actually work outside of the company. And by defaulting to open, we're actually tapping into all of the intelligent horsepower that sits anywhere around the world. It could be in Bangalore, it could be in Korea, it could be with Samsung, but they are all these smart people around the world are now working with Google. And instead of just a few hundred people, we have millions of people actually collaboratively working with us and driving innovation. We don't do it with simply with technology. As a result, the Android platform has become the most deployed technology in human history of any technology, at more than 1.3, 1.4 billion units of Android-based devices are out there in the world. We also do it with data, we do it with marketing ideas. So let me show you an example. I'll use Google Maps as an example. So Google Maps, many of you use it, probably all of you use it, an extremely useful product. The challenge the team faces is that map information changes every day. Street names change, new streets are built, buildings go up, buildings come down, rivers change direction. So keeping Google Maps current is not an easy job, especially in the developing world where a lot of this information is not even recorded. The people living there know it, but we don't have access to the information. How do we stay on top of it? A few hundred engineers working at Google or data analysts cannot do it. So a few years ago, the Google team in India came up with this brilliant idea. They built a product called Map Maker, and they said, why don't we throw the map open and let people around the world update the information? They know the information, let's make it. Why should Google be the only company that does it? So that's what they've done with Google Maps. That's how we keep it current. It's simply not just Google, but you could be updating and making the information current if you see something in your neighborhood is not. So here's an example of it. So let's use a part of Kerala, okay? So let's say the Alapi area or Kottayam district. The town of Kottayam, when we got the map from the government, it just showed the map at the top level, the main freeways meeting at the Kottayam railway station. We throw the map open and tell the residents of Kottayam, update it, keep it updated, and they do it. When I do the next image, it's a time-lapse video. On the top left, you'll see the months go by, and the main image, you'll see the map getting richer and richer as the people of Kottayam are now keeping the map current on their own. As you can see, by the time we got to January 2013, the map of Kottayam has been richly built out. And this is how, by defaulting to open, we've kept all of Google Map around the world. All of Poland was mapped out, all of Pakistan has been mapped out, all of the islands in the Caribbean have been mapped out because of the people there. So instead of hundreds, we have millions of people working and doing it for us. But we don't just stop it with technology and data, we can even do it with marketing. So here's an example. So I just demonstrated voice search, how you can speak to Google and search. If I were to explain that to my mother who lives in Tricur, I would lose her in 4 seconds. My engineering speak, my business school speak gets in the way. I overcomplicate things. I cannot explain things in a simple way. So a while back we realized that the people who can actually explain our technology are our customers, are our users. So we invited them saying, why don't you explain our technology because you can do a much better job. And hundreds of videos started pouring in onto YouTube. So to show you an example of the Paul brothers who live in New York, 3 young kids, explaining voice search. What they're going to do in this video is they are demonstrating voice search, but in their own innovative way. And they're doing it by searching for Chubby Bunny. Chubby Bunny was a movie that came out, and they're searching for Chubby Bunny in their own unique way. And think of your own, someone in your family, like an older relative who may not be that familiar with technology, to see if they will be able to watch this video and understand how voice search works. So instead of me, here's how the Paul brothers are explaining. Google Voice Search. So this is one of the four pillars.
This is how it works. So each person would say Chubby Bunny into the speaker like this. Chubby Bunny. Then it would say working here. If it says that, then they get the point. It doesn't? No. Okay, so I'll go first. Alright, let's go two. Chubby Bunny. Okay, it's working. Yeah, great. That's how it goes. Okay. Come on, GJ. Chubby Bunny. It's working. Four. Chubby Bunny. It's working. So you get 4. Chubby Bunny.
So a couple of things here. Now, we couldn't have paid $1 million to some agency in Madison Avenue and got a creative like this, right? Whereas these kids are able to imagine it. And so do you see the legal age of those kids? We can't hire them legally. But by defaulting to open, we get the creative horsepower to come and work for us, and hundreds of marketing ideas like this. So this is the whole idea of defaulting to open, where it's not simply the 50,000 employees at Google, but there are 5 million people working with us and making our products and concepts better. How well do you think this will work for you in your organization, where you don't just limit creativity and innovation to your company, but you pull in your customers and the whole world outside to come and join you? Is that too radical? Yeah? A couple of people feel comfortable? I don't see too much of that. Do you feel comfortable? Good, okay. So think about it, where you don't limit innovation to just the people you pay salary to, but bring in the external world and also to participate in it. The last two innovation principle is a concept called fail well, which you already covered, which is failure is not a stigma at Google. In fact, it's a badge of honor. When Larry took over as CEO 2-3 years ago, he killed 73 projects. He looked at it and said, these projects, we tried long and hard, let's end them. We don't do it quietly, we do it publicly. He did a big blog post about it saying, these are the projects we are ending. The people who work on them are not laid off, they're not fired. In fact, they are considered more valuable. Other teams will come and hire them away. Because if you tried something hard and you fail, you know what works and what does not, so you are considered extremely more valuable. If you look at my resume at Google, it's littered with failures. In fact, every quarter, if you don't show a few failures, it's not considered a good thing for your career, because that means you're not taking big enough risk. You're not trying. And funnily enough, somebody's actually created a graveyard, a non-Googler, an external person. He's created these tombstones for every failed product. It's almost like a virtual graveyard, and it's a badge of honor. If you worked on the product, you can go put a virtual flower on it and grieve a little bit, but then move on and take your lessons. So failing and giving a culture of failure is a key innovation principle. How do you think it sits well in a culture in Kerala? It's a little bit long enough. Is failure stigma? And in some sense, yes, it is a stigma. Yeah,
it starts from school.
Where you're not allowed to fail, right? Yeah, because I've seen the suicide rate, for example, in schools where 10 standard. Yeah, so that's something for us to think about. If you want to be innovative as a state and as a region and for innovative companies, and I know in Asian cultures in general, failure is not an easy thing to come with. It's a question of face, etc. But that's something that needs to change, and Google has been able to overcome it. Failure is actually a badge of honor, and they've been able to change their thinking around it. The last one that I want to end up with is having a very strong mission. So if I look at the Rajagiri Institute of Management, the reason it is thriving is it has a very strong sense of mission around education or business education, and creating a certain level of excellence around it. And when you create an organization with a strong sense of mission and purpose, and then allow your employees or associates to do what they want, you'll be delighted with the kind of results that come back. So at Google, what drives the 50,000 people is this very strong sense of mission, that the work we do matters and actually has a positive impact on millions of people around the world. This is, if you ask anybody who works at Google, they say, come into work because I feel on a daily basis I am touching millions of people and I'm a force for good and positive change, and that's how I want to drive innovation. Now, the story will vary employee to employee. Everyone has their own version. So if you don't mind, do Would you like to hear my version of a mission that matters? Say yeah? Okay, so I'll end with my own personal story as to why 9 years later I'm so excited and energized about working at Google every single day. For that, I actually want to take you to this little rice farming village that the director mentioned when he started, or actually it was Mr. Kallayil who mentioned that. He said that I was born in Chitlagear. That is not true. My sister was born there, but my parents were living in Hyderabad, so I was actually born in Hyderabad at that time. But it's still my core village. In fact, one of my cousins is here, where Malini way at the back. Yeah, she knows Chitlagear as well. In fact, she knows these paddy fields because they used to carry her around as a little baby down these fields as well. But this is where my grandparents lived as modest Kerala-based rice farmers, tilling a small plot of land that they inherited from their parents. And this is where my parents lived as well. It was my mother's village. My father was from a neighboring village called Punisheri. They're all in Alapur Taluk. And he was also the child of rice farmers. So when they were growing up, it was a very modest kind of living in that village. So they grew up without electricity. They grew up without running water. The only education they had access to was the village school. So 10 years of school, up to SSLC, and then their education ended. Because there's no college for miles around. So they finished their educational career with none of the privileges that all of us here have had. But they had aspirations for their kids, like everyone else around the world, which is to bring their kids up and give them access to good education. So they created the circumstances and gave us the freedom and independence so that their 4 children, that is me and my 3 siblings, went on to get 10 college degrees, including 2 from US Ivy League business schools, even though my parents had never set foot in America. So we are often asked the question, what caused that kind of social mobility in one generation for this family that grew up in Chitlagear? And it was simple, access to information. So growing up and studying in Kerala, I studied in the Government Arts College in Trivandrum, and I would look for whatever information I could get to see how to advance my career. Where should I apply? I would go to the public library. It was very slow access to information back then. In fact, I'll give you an example. When I finished my engineering degree at the National Institute of Technology, I was thinking of applying to graduate schools in the US. I took a train, Rockford Express, 8-hour overnight train journey from Tiruchirappalli to Chennai so that I could look at a physical copy of the US World Use Guide to Graduate Schools at the USIS Library in Chennai. That's the only place I knew for all of southern India, a population of 400 million people, where I could look at a physical copy. But I was willing to travel 8 hours by train to get that information. Today, we pull out our phones and we can look up this information. If it doesn't come within 8 seconds, we get restless saying, oh, this is not working. But back then I was willing to do it for 8 hours. Now when I go, last week I was in Chitlagear for a ceremony in our family temple, and I look at the school, say this kind of schools that my mother studied. It looks pretty much the same physically, infrastructure-wise, except one difference. In tens of thousands of schools like this, and in schools around the world. So the story is unfolding not just here, but in Indonesia, in Siberia, in Ghana, in parts of America, and in parts of Africa. Kids with access to computers and the internet and the kind of services that we're building in Google and other similar companies now have access to the same amount of information as somebody who's at one of the top universities in the world. They can watch the same TED Talks, and they can watch the TED Talks that is translated. They can go look at National Geographic videos of undersea life in the Galapagos Island. They can search for information. So in an era where information is like oxygen, we are leveling the playing field for humanity. We are creating an equal opportunity world that every human being with connection to the internet will now have access to all publicly available information in the language of choice. And that is what inspires me every single day to come out with innovation. This is my personal credo for and my tie back to my own life. And this doesn't just quite end there. And I look at the kind of things that the problems that Googlers are trying to solve, that my colleagues are trying to solve, and it sometimes has a direct personal connection to my own life. So my father, 4 years ago, was watching me give the speech, including this particular slide. And he's watching it in Thrissur using the internet. Thanks to the internet, he was able to see his son speak in America live. And it was around midnight India time. And in the morning he woke up, felt dizzy, fell on the ground, had a fainting attack, and as a result injured his spinal cord and became paralyzed from the neck down. In an instant, it changed the family trajectory. So over the last few years, we've been rehabilitating him and trying to come up with a normal functional life using physical therapy, etc. So his mobility is a lot limited. And he is one example of millions of people around the world who are in some sort of a situation like that. Many of us at some point in our life are going to be faced with some sort of physical limitation. And it's an important problem to solve. And there are many of my colleagues who are working on those kind of solutions. So in fact, one of the products that my colleague has developed that I brought on my last trip when I came in November to see if my father could use it. Unfortunately, he could not use it, but my aunt who lives in Palakkad who suffers from Parkinson's, she might be a likely candidate. I'll show you the kind of product. And this is the kind of innovation that Google is constantly driving that I feel so inspired to come and work and drive. So the product that I brought back from my dad that my aunt uses is a simple product. So if you have a hand trimmer, okay, it's very difficult to eat food because anything you take on a spoon falls off. We don't think about it, but if you have someone who has hand trimmers in your family, think about it. It's socially awkward. They don't go out because restaurants it gets mad. They don't go to weddings because eating food itself is a 2-hour job. So it limits their life in so many ways. And there are millions of people who have this problem. So a team of colleagues at Google is working on this product. It's called Liftware. Here's how it works. And this is a product I brought back last time for my dad.
Tremor, whether from essential tremor or Parkinson's disease, takes away from this experience, forcing people to focus instead on the basic task of eating. Currently, there's no cure for these disorders, and the solutions out there often fall short or are invasive. After seeing some of my own friends struggling with their tremor, I realized the frustration, loss of dignity, and social isolation that tremor can have. We invented the Liftware spoon to cancel hand tremor and take the frustration out of eating. For the first time, we have the technology to actively stabilize a person's tremor in a device so small that it fits in your hand. The spoon works by sensing a person's tremor and intelligently stabilizing itself to make the food's journey from the pit to the mouth much easier.
So as it said, it is innovation like this that I have personal connection with that fuels my own desire to come back every single day, that sense of a deep mission that matters. So I want to end with this, hopefully give you a sense of how you create a culture of innovation, starting with telling everyone who works in your organization that you have the freedom to innovate, giving them 20% time, and most importantly, creating that very strong sense of mission where there's a direct personal connection to what you're doing and having a big positive impact on the world. Thank you.